Geek Therapy Radio.
High above the mucky muck castle made of clouds, there sits Wonder Boy, sitting oh so proudly. Not much to say when you're high above the mucky muck. Yeah, yeah, Wonder Boy, what is the secret of your power?
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. Of course, I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and it's the new year. We're getting back into the groove here at Geek Therapy Radio, getting back into the groove of 5 fresh podcasts per week. Yes, the 5th podcast is kind of cheating because it's the broadcast. But really, it's 5 podcasts per week. So the first 4 are way more freeform, unencumbered by regularly scheduled commercial breaks. Not that you hear the commercial breaks much in the podcast version of the broadcast, because I just keep the music flowing. You're unaware of the commercials. But yeah, 5 podcasts a week. It gets a little bit busy over the holidays, and that's exactly what happened. And frankly, not a whole lot of news happened over the holidays. Holidays tends to be pretty slow as far as tech is concerned, at least. Over the holidays, I was talking about, Red Ryder BB guns. I was talking about, what else was I talking about over the holidays? Christmas-related things, Christmas stories from various coworkers and friends and family. It was fairly Christmas themed. Last year, I think I did the history of mistletoe, why we kiss under the mistletoe. Nobody really listened much to that, but again, that's the holidays too. Not many people listen during the holidays. So there's not much going on during the holidays news-wise. People are traveling all around. They're not in town. It's just kind of slow. It's a slump. With tech companies, they tend to do their big tech news, or I should say, they do their tech news usually at the beginning of the year. CES is happening right now. My friend Michael Garfield is at CES right now. I'm sure we'll get a report from him over the next week or check in with him. But these companies don't usually release their products until the summertime or late in the year, so that they can meet the hype for the holiday present buying season. They don't release it early. I mean, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But most of the time, let's say PlayStation or Sony or Microsoft, they're going to release their new consoles. Nintendo, they're usually going to release consoles in time for the Christmas shopping holiday season. So that's what we're getting a glimpse of at CES this year, and I'll do a show about CES like I mentioned. I'll probably talk to Michael Garfield about it, get some input there. But I actually had it's an interesting story that's going to be the meat and potatoes of the podcast today. It's something that I couldn't ignore. When I'm laying there in bed and listening to a podcast in my little in-ear Bluetooth thing so I don't disturb my wife, I play my iPad game, Simple Planes. It's on Android and iOS, but Simple Planes, I usually just listen to a podcast and play Simple Planes, build airplanes, and that's how I kind of I fall asleep that way. When I can't keep my eyes open looking at this airplane I built, that's when I know when I fall asleep. But when I go to search something on Google, before, at least with Chrome, before I open a new Google page or a new tab to Google search something, that blank tab it has some news stories that you think that's going to, based on your Googling and everything, it's stuff that you think that Google thinks will interest you. And a lot of the times there are things in there that interest me. And one story that came across my eyeballs is something I couldn't ignore. It was just so funny. It's just so funny. And that is, for those who may or may not know, AMD, the X570 motherboard platform, I believe, the new series of Ryzen processors, is the first processor and motherboard to support PCIe Express 4.0, which is supposed to be twice as fast as the outgoing PCI Express 3.0. So PCI Express, that is what's running for most people. That is the part of the motherboard, the part of the processor that is running and talking to things like your graphics card and your PCIe NVMe M.2 SSDs, your solid state drives. Those solid state drives that look like a stick of gum. Those can be SATA, but for the most part nowadays they're NVMe and they operate off the PCI Express throughput of the processor and motherboard. And right now the status quo is PCI Express 3.0. Also, your graphics cards, your video cards run off of that PCI Express, those PCI Express lanes. But those two things typically for most users are what's occupying that PCI Express throughput. AMD is the first to adopt and roll out the new protocol, the new PCIe Express 4.0 protocol, well ahead of Intel. AMD has made things, have come up so fast behind Intel that Intel is spinning its head. It doesn't know how to even react to what AMD is doing, which is a great thing for us consumers. If I had the money, right now is the time I would build a new PC. I would build a new AMD PC. A few episodes ago, we were hunting for the 3950X. That's a 16-core, 32-thread consumer-grade processor with more PCIe Express lanes 4.0 Express lanes than you can shake a stick at. It's ready for the new PCIe Express 4.0 peripherals and components that can take advantage of that speed hike and bandwidth hike over the outgoing PCI Express 3.0. Remember, to the tune of twice as fast, up to twice as fast as 3.0. And AMD is the only one who has it. You can go out right now and utilize PCI Express 4.0 right now if you buy an AMD build and do a new AMD build using the latest generation of Ryzen and Threadripper. I had to double check on Threadripper. Does Threadripper, the next generation of Threadripper, definitely, the newest generation, yes, of Threadripper definitely uses PCIe Express 4.0, but I've got Google right now in front of me. Threadripper, I just want to verify. Threadripper PCIe 4.0. Yes, it does. I just wanted to verify. I had a good inkling, but I wanted to be sure about that. So if you want to utilize PCIe 4.0, AMD is the only chip manufacturer offering this new protocol. Where it gets funny and downright embarrassing, and this is the main meat and potatoes of what I'm getting at. Intel also makes solid-state drives. They also make NVMe solid-state drives. They call it Optane. They're developing new Intel solid-state drives using what they call, 3D X-point technology. It's going to be blazingly fast, not quite as fast theoretically as RAM, because that's another thing that a lot of us are thinking is, with as fast as solid-state drives are getting, PCIe 4.0 solid-state drives are going to have read and write speeds around 5,000 megahertz. That's 5 gigahertz per second. RAM, DDR4 RAM, overclocked, gets around 4 gigabytes per second of throughput, 4,000 megahertz of throughput. That's overclocked. So theoretically, this new PCIe 4.0 solid-state drives are going to have just as fast, if not a little bit faster, storage speeds, bandwidth as RAM. There's differences in solid state storage and RAM that I won't quite get into because frankly I'm not going to BS you. I don't know all the ins and outs of what the difference completely are with RAM storage and with solid state storage. I do know one of the biggest things. One of the biggest differences I can tell you right off the bat is that RAM is what's called volatile memory, meaning that when you turn off your computer and electricity is taken away from the RAM, all the memory of the RAM is cleared. It does not remember anything. It's just completely blank as soon as you turn off your computer and you take voltage away from the RAM. It's volatile memory. With solid-state drives and solid-state storage, it's not volatile memory. It's memory that holds its information. It holds its memory. It's not volatile. And usually that was the trade-off over the years, was that volatile memory could be very, very fast, but it could not store any information after the computer's turned off. Versus traditional storage, even solid-state storage wasn't as fast as RAM, but it could remember everything that you downloaded to it, all the programs that you put on it. So when you download a game off of Steam onto your solid-state drive, when you turn off your computer and turn it back on again, hey, all your operating system and your games and your applications are all still there on the solid-state storage, where they are gonzo from the volatile RAM, random access memory. So that's the big difference between solid-state storage and RAM. Will we get to the point, I'm getting slightly off track here, but it's a very fascinating concept, and we're all geeks about something. We're going to geek out about this for a moment. This is a question to you, the listener. Do you think we're ever going to get here? GeekTherapy Radio at iHeartMedia.com. That's the email, GeekTherapy at iHeartMedia.com, or on Twitter, GeekTherapy Radio on Twitter. And the question is this. Do you think we're going to get to the point where there's no difference between RAM and solid-state storage? Are they just going to get rid of RAM altogether because solid-state storage is going to be so fast that RAM is going to be a thing of the past? That when you install a 4 terabyte or whatever, 8 terabyte solid-state drive in your computer, it's going to be so fast that it's going to open the programs instantaneously because it does not need to transfer the program from the solid-state storage through the CPU onto the RAM and vice versa to load the programs off of RAM, because that's the way it works right now. When you have a piece of software and you go to open Google, for instance, if you go to open Chrome, it's sending that from the hard drive through the CPU to the RAM, and then from the RAM through the CPU out to your graphics card or whatever it's displayed to you. The point is that there's a few little junctions there where the data has to pass through, that if solid-state storage gets fast enough and reliable enough, will we just get rid of random access memory altogether? It will be redundant. It'll be unneeded at that point, where everything you open, all the programs and everything running can just be running straight off the solid-state drive, just as fast, if not faster, than RAM, and a lot safer because it's not volatile memory. You're not going to lose it all when you turn the computer off. So what do you think? Are we going to get there? I did a show recently about what to look out for, kind of tech to navigate going through the 2020s, and I was talking about deepfake and AI and quantum computing and all that good stuff, but something that just popped into my mind that I should have mentioned there is that I think within the next 10 years, easily, we could possibly see RAM, as we know it, becoming a thing of the past. That computers no longer have a need for RAM because the storage is so fast anyways. The hard drive is so fast anyways. I think we'll see that in the next 10 years. I think that's a good possibility of seeing in the next 10 years. Solid-state storage has just exploded in functionality over the past even 5 years. When I bought my first solid-state drive, I think it was 120 gigs. It was like $400. And that was, man, I want to say around 2010, 2011. Possibly 2012. Solid-state storage was very expensive, but it's a night and day difference over traditional hard disk storage, optical and magnetic hard disk storage. I heard somebody recently and we'll get back onto Intel's SSD in a moment, but I heard somebody recently at Micro Center just a couple years ago asking the sales associate if solid state drive was really worth it, going over, switching from that to solid state drive from a traditional hard drive. And both me and the sales associate were just, it was one of those moments where you don't know how to answer somebody because the answer is so obviously yes, so night and day, so revolutionarily yes. You will notice a massive difference. It is the single best upgrade you can possibly make to your computer is going from traditional storage to solid state drive. That will make your old computer act better than new. Usually storage is the bottleneck of any system, and when you go solid state, you remove that bottleneck from your system. For instance, I've got a solid state drive in this old Core 2 Quad Q6600 build. That's a processor that came out in 2007. Solid state for sure didn't exist as it exists now in 2007, but pairing solid state storage up with, even on SATA 2, solid state storage up with a Q6600 from 2007, that's a quite usable processor now. That processor is fully unleashed in a way that we would never have experienced back in 2007. It is crazy how much better solid state storage makes your computer. If you're listening to this and you're still using an optical hard drive, get your tech-savvy nephew or niece to clone your hard disk over to solid-state storage and just be baffled by how fast your computer is now. It is ridiculous how much of an upgrade it is. Okay, getting back to Intel and their solid-state storage. This is the embarrassing thing. Intel is working on PCIe 4.0 solid-state storage. You follow me so far? Intel does not have a processor that can handle PCIe 4.0. They're building solid-state storage for processors that can't utilize their new solid-state storage. What that means is, to its full extent, what that means is Intel has to test their PCIe 4.0 solid-state drives using AMD processors because Intel doesn't have processors of their own that can support it. Let that just sink in. If AMD was nipping on Intel's heels, PCIe 4.0 means that AMD, just for the first time ever that I can think back to, definitely in the past decade, AMD has just edged out ahead of Intel. AMD has just slapped Intel right across the face. They are the new winners. AMD is the new king of processors going into the new decade. As of 2020, if you want the latest and greatest technology in your computer, you have to go AMD now. That's a crazy sentence to say in 2020. If you want the latest and greatest, if you want all your stuff to operate the fastest possible, you have to go with AMD now. Yes, you can argue, but still in gaming, there's still games that are more optimized for Intel processors, and they edge out AMD in some games. You get faster frames if your graphics card can support it. So games are a little bit faster, a little bit more frames with an Intel. That's going to change too quickly. That already has been changing dramatically. What that boils down to is the game developers optimizing for whatever processor has the bigger market share, whatever gamers are using to play games on. And in the past, for the past 10 years, easily, it's been Intel. Gamers have been gaming on Intel chips. So game developers, so your Battlefield and your Star Wars and all your esports and all that good stuff is all being developed and optimized for Intel CPUs. The tide is turning now. You're seeing more and more developers optimizing their games for AMD, at least bringing AMD up to snuff in terms of gaming, or coding their games so that AMD isn't left behind anymore in terms of optimization. That is monumental. If you would have asked me 5 years ago where AMD would be in the next 5 years, I would have never have dreamed they would be where they are at now. Never have dreamed. AMD was always what you bought when you didn't have enough money for Intel. That's what it was. AMD now is what you buy if you want the latest and greatest and best possible cutting edge technology that is available today. It is only on an AMD system. So further to the point of Intel developing PCIe 4.0 solid-state drives, but they cannot test them on their own chips because their CPUs don't have 4.0, you might ask yourself, well, surely, since we're in the 10th generation of Intel processors, don't those have PCIe 4.0, don't they? Nope. No, they do not. The latest offerings from Intel do not have PCIe 4.0. And here's the kicker. Here is the absolute kicker. The soonest we could possibly see an Intel CPU that supports PCIe 4.0 is 2021. And even though that's kind of a long shot, so we are at shortest, at the very least, about a year away, a little over a year away from seeing PCIe 4.0 on Intel. We're at least a year away. I say at least because Intel, in the past few years, have had big time problems rolling out the 10 nanometer process in that time. AMD has already shot out ahead of them with the 7 nanometer process. Intel is having a hard time making processors and innovating processors right now. So it's wishful thinking that the 11th gen Intels are going to have PCIe 4.0. That is wishful thinking. That also begs the question, is Intel going to release, I think they are, because they're going to want to sell something. Is Intel going to release their PCIe 4.0 solid-state drives to the consumer, knowing that the consumer buying that Intel drive has no choice but to put it in an AMD system if they want that full PCIe 4.0 experience? Yes, they will be backwards compatible with PCIe 3.0. Of course, that just makes sense. But if no one's going to buy a PCIe 4.0 solid-state drive to put in a 3.0 system. That's not going to make sense. If you're going to be making a new build with the latest and greatest technology, you're leaving a lot of headroom on the table. You're leaving a lot of power on the table. You're paying for 5,000 megabytes read and write, yet you will only get about 3,500 or so on PCIe 3.0. What's the fastest 3.0 processor thereabouts now? Yeah, about 3,500 read and about 3,000 write. Thereabouts for 3.0, whereas 4.0 is 5,000 read and about 4,500 write. That is blisteringly fast, and you are basically leaving a gig read and write on the table if you buy a 4.0 processor or 4.0 solid-state drive and use it on a 3.0 system, 3.0 chipset, PCIe chipset. That's crazy. To recap real quick, Intel's working on PCIe 4.0 solid-state drives that will only work, at least for the next year, on an AMD processor. See, you can't... I hate the phrase, you couldn't write a script like this. Well, you could. That's a very lazy expression. Yes, you could write it. And when sports announcers say, you could not write a script like this, yes, you can. They write scripts like that all the time. That being said, I still would have never, ever dreamt this was in the cards. To have Intel be surpassed by AMD to the point where Intel is embarrassing itself by having to use AMD processors to test their solid-state drives. That's bonkers to me. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else I wanted to mention in this podcast, so bear with me just 1 second as I look over some notes real quick. I don't think the biggest thing that's kind of in my mind right now, it's not that political, because I think of it's a funny way. I have a funny thought on it. So for those of you who are unaware, Ricky Gervais was at the Golden Globes, and he just absolutely shredded Hollywood, shredded actors and actresses, just savagely ripped them. And it was glorious. It was really funny. That's what Ricky Gervais does. He's a very controversial comedian. He is extremely offensive to every walk of life. There is no such thing as a sacred calf he won't touch. He will absolutely destroy Christians. He will absolutely destroy politicians. He will absolutely destroy anything and everything you hold sacred. As a matter of fact, the more you think you shouldn't joke about something is the more Ricky Gervais digs into it poignantly. There are things that I won't mention that people say you should never joke about. Can't say that to Ricky Gervais because he will joke about it. He will go for the throat. That's what he does. So my only observation on that, on what he said at the Golden Globes and how he ripped into the Hollywood elite and ripped into Disney and ripped into Apple to their faces, basically, is that it's funny. The aftershock from that is a lot of, I'll put it like this. A lot of commentary outlets on a certain side of the aisle have picked up that torch and ran with it. They are hailing Ricky Gervais as the new hero for this particular political party or this movement, these supporters, so to speak, which is baffling to me. My only funny thought on that is that these people getting on to talk radio and spouting the glory of Ricky Gervais, these national talk shows that just love Ricky Gervais, I doubt they knew Ricky Gervais's name before Sunday. That's the only thing I gotta say about that. They have another thing coming to them when they do a little bit more research on who Ricky Gervais is. They may not be touting him as their golden boy right now. If they do a little bit of research into Ricky Gervais's career. Ricky Gervais has pissed off everybody. And he is certainly the anti supporter of their cause, I'll just say. Think of a big name in talk radio, think of a big name on certain news networks, they are running with this Ricky Gervais thing. They're praising him because they didn't know about him before Sunday. And when they realize who he is, boy, will they have egg on their face. Ricky Gervais is the opposite of who they are praising him to be. And that's all I promise I will say about that. That isn't even what the last thing I wanted to mention. We're getting on a little bit in this podcast here, but there was something else. I know there was something else. Yeah. You don't know what I'm talking about. You don't know what I'm yang. There's this device. It's a little thing here. There's a device that Dell has released at CES, a concept for, a prototype for. It's basically PC gaming on what looks like a Nintendo Switch type device. So a landscape-oriented controls on the left and right-hand side of the screen device that plays PC games. But here's the thing. In regards to CES, a lot of manufacturers like Dell will come to CES and they'll showcase prototypes for things that they never intend to actually sell. There were, well, I won't use any examples, but there are a lot of prototypes for things that they display at CES. Razer does this all the freaking time. Razer is a PC gaming company. They release prototypes of tech that never see the light of day to consumers, but that's all they're doing. They're showcasing the technology. This could come down the pipe in one shape or form. For instance, they might actually bring that out. I was going to say 340 or 350 hertz high refresh rate monitors. That may actually come out. That's easier to bring out, I think, than a prototype PC gaming Nintendo Switch competitor. It's a concept UFO is what it's called. There's no details about the hardware at all as of right now, as of recording, but there's a company called GPD that makes some actually awesome products. This is not sponsored at all. Some products aren't good, but some are. If you're into emulation and Android emulation, they have the GPD XD, which is very popular among the emulating community. I've got a couple of their products. I have the GPD Win and GPD Pocket. Those are both handheld computers. One of them is a netbook. The GPD Pocket is a netbook type computer, and the GPD Win is a clamshell 3DS type looking device that runs Windows, and you can play PC games on it. Usually you're going to use it to run emulators, but you can put Steam on there and play games that don't need very much graphics horsepower. So I say that to say this. Those are both Atom-powered devices. The GPD Win and the GPD Pocket, both powered by Atom processors, at least the ones that I own. So I'm interested what would be in this Dell UFO concept for PC gaming. Are they going to be cloud gaming or streaming over a network, or they actually... My only guess would be some sort of low-powered AMD APU, like a Ryzen 3 with Radeon. Do they still call it Radeon? Vega, with Vega 11 or Vega 9 graphics, which it's better than whatever's built into Intel chips, but still not that much better. I mean, I haven't benchmarked it myself, but it's going to be better than whatever Intel has on their chips. It's going to be a little bit more graphics horsepower if it's based on an AMD APU with Vega 9 or Vega 11 built-in graphics. That's what I hope it is. I hope it's not some glorified Google Stadia streaming piece of garbage. Poor Google Stadia. But I don't feel bad. If you are a regular listener to Geek Therapy Radio, I have been talking about Google Stadia's major hurdles that it will have to face when it came out. And Google Stadia has come out, and those exact same hurdles, lag and latency, are what's crippling the Google Stadia right now. I think it's a cool concept. One day we'll get to full game streaming. Maybe when 5G, that's another thing I'm skeptical of, gets to the point where it could handle that sort of thing. Maybe when ISPs, when your internet service providers get with the times and stop the bull crap caps on data. Do you know how much data you're going to chew through game streaming? It boggles the mind. It beggars belief. I went over my data cap last month, and that boggled my mind and beggared my belief. We're in 2020, and I have a 1 terabyte data cap on my internet connection. I can only use 1 terabyte of data per month, and I don't even game stream. I don't even game through the cloud. I dabble with GeForce now sometimes. But to try to switch people's gaming habits from playing locally on their own hardware to streaming it over the internet, boy, oh boy, something has to be done with data caps from your internet service provider. It's stupid in 2020 that data caps haven't just been erased entirely. I digress. This has been a long podcast. Thank you for listening. I had fun doing it. There's a lot of fun concepts that we got onto here. Yeah, I got a little testy with the Ricky Gervais stuff. I try to keep this kind of a neutral show, but you know. I'm free to get a little goofy in the podcasts. Oh, quickly on the way out, I modded 3 of my Game Boys. I have 2 Game Boy DMGs, the big fat boy brick 1989 Game Boys. One of them is 100% original. I just replaced the plastic screen with a reproduction glass screen. So that is looking nice and sharp. And the other one, my biverted and backlit DMG, I replaced with a I replaced this plastic screen with a white bezeled glass screen. I'll put it up on Geek Therapy Radio Instagram. I'll show you this stuff. So a white beveled screen on there, or white bezeled screen on there with white buttons. And that is on the biverted, backlit, modded DMG Game Boy. It looks really cool. I will put it up on the Geek Therapy Radio Instagram, so subscribe to it if you haven't already. I've been enjoying these geeky things. Quick reminder, I am pretty far along in my Q6600 video. I mentioned that system earlier in this podcast, and I keep teasing that I'm working on the video. I keep teasing it because this stuff takes time, and things keep coming up. The obligations keep coming up, and even if the obligations weren't there, it still takes time to do videos like this. These are videos that are way more polished, way more, I guess, cinematic, a lot more care. It's not off the cuff. It's scripted. I'm trying to get points across. These are special videos that I make. And so that is definitely come along. I've got a lot of B-roll. I've started writing the script that is in the works. It's a video I've wanted to make for a couple years now. Basically, I'm testing how good the Q6600 is. It came out in 2007. How good is it in modern times in 2020, and what graphics card pairs the best to it? Overall, it's a tinkering video. It's just to celebrate tinkering. It's just to celebrate the fact that, hey, not all of us have six figures of disposable income that we can build new computers whenever we want, but a lot of us still have old parts laying around that we like to tinker with. So now that we're all moved into the house, I found all my old socket 775 parts and motherboards, and I've got old computer cases and old computer cards or graphics cards laying around. So I'm putting together a build with the Q6600 that basically leaves the CPU, the Q6600, as the only bottleneck in the system. And if it's the only bottleneck in the system, how much of a graphics card can it accept before it gets excessive? Basically, the frames are going to be capped to a certain point, no matter how powerful you get a graphics card in there, because the CPU physically cannot run the game fast enough to keep up with a graphics card. So that is to say that a big beefy graphics card like a GTX 980, I know it's a few years old now, but it's still a beefy graphics card by any stretch of the imagination. A big beefy GTX 980 will get the same performance with a Q6600 as a, theoretically, like a GTX 650 Ti, something that's way older than a GTX 980. Even if you put in a GTX or an RTX 2080 Ti or a Titan or whatever you have, whatever, that you're going to be capped to that 45 frames a second, just arbitrary number. You'll be capped at 45 frames a second, even if you put in a $3,000 graphics card, because the CPU is going to limit it. But that's not a bad thing. It's just, okay, so if we know that it's a bad choice to put in a super powerful graphics card because you'll get no benefit, how low and how cheap down the spectrum of used gear can you go to get the maximum amount of performance? The best match to the Q6600. And once you're there, what can you do with it? What can you play with it? What kind of content can you create with it? And I'll just let you in behind the curtain a little bit more. I've mentioned this in the past, and I swear I told you I was wrapping up, but I just get on these nerd rants. That's probably why you listen to Geek Therapy Radio, these nerd rants, these geek rants. The past several episodes, in the past two podcasts that I've uploaded to YouTube, the video portion, everything that I've been doing right now, my workstation, the only PC that I've been using other than my laptop right now, is this Q6600 build. I've got a 650 Ti graphics card in there. I've recorded all my past few podcasts with it. I've recorded my last couple radio shows with it. I've edited the past couple YouTube videos with it. It's what I'm using right now. And it's so that I can get the data so that I know what to say when I make the video about it. How has the Q6600 build been in 2020? And so far, it's been pretty good. There are limits, but I will get to that in the video when it's released. I'm working on it. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I haven't released a lot of podcasts in the past couple weeks, so I think you'll bear with me that I do a long one here to make up for lost time. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio podcast. Tell your friends about it if you like it. That would help me out a lot. Hey, I got this podcast, this guy, Geek Therapy Radio, is pretty cool. Make sure you send them to me. There's a Geek Therapy network. There's no radio involved in it. There's a Geek Therapy network of podcasts. That's not me. My color scheme is white, black, and red. And it's Geek Therapy Radio Podcast with Johnny Hemberger. You can't miss it. The logo is a big red heart with white letters. That's my color scheme, white, black, and red. Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hemberger when you tell your friends, or just send them a link or something like that. That would be awesome. Also, email me. I'm going to have a few listeners on the show. Asaf, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I keep hoping. Asaf, I'm going to have you on here. I know we've talked. A few others. I think there's one guy from, the guy who lives in Japan. He's a New Zealander who lives in Japan and he teaches English. Going to have him on the show if he still wants to. No pressure or anything. Of course, no pressure. Things are busy. You don't have to call. You come on the show. It's fine. But yeah, so a lot happening in Geek Therapy Radio coming up, so be sure you stay tuned for that. But above all else, and I'll get back to doing these at the beginning of the shows. I promise you I'll remember. These motivations I'll start doing at the beginning of the shows. That's the habit I'm trying to make, but I'm only human. We're all geeks about something, so embrace your inner geek. Know, above all else, that you are loved, that you are worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love, you're worthy of receiving love, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. Very often, it is much easier to love someone else than it is to love ourselves. So let's try to chip away each day at loving ourselves, at trusting ourselves, at knowing our own self-worth, of building that self-worth. And one way I think we can do that is by embracing our geek thing with a little bit of geek therapy each day. I don't mean my show, Geek Therapy. I mean, if that helps you, that's great. But I mean, find your geek therapy. If you like modding old Game Boys and that gives you good geek therapy, do that. If you like soccer and you haven't played soccer in a few years, or football, for the rest of you in the world, maybe get back into that. American football, if you used to play, go toss the pigskin around a little bit. Records, vinyl records, dust off your old records, play some records, fiddle around with your turntable, replace the stylus, do something with your hands. If you used to do yard work and now you can't be bothered, but you used to like doing yard work, maybe tell the yard work guy to, take a little vacation, get out there and rake some leaves, work outside, find your geek thing, lean into it, get some good geek therapy. And other than that, stay tuned tomorrow when I don't know what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Something geeky. I can assure you of that. But until then, take care, everybody. Talk to you next time. Have a great day, too.
Now it's time for me to tell you about young Nasty Man, arch rival and nemesis of Wonder Boy, with powers comparable to Wonder Boy. What powers, you ask? I don't know, how about the power of flight? Does it do anything for you? It's levitation, Holmes. How about the power to kill a yak from 200 yards away? With mind bullets! That's telekinesis, Kyle! How about the power to move you? History of Wonder Boy and young Nasty Man. Rig-a-goo-goo, a secret to be told, a gold chest to be pulled, and blasting forth with three-part harmony. Go! Wonder Boy, what is the secret of your power? Wonder Boy, won't you take me far away from the lucky man? Wonder Boy and young Nasty Man joined forces. They formed a band the likes of which had never been seen, and they called themselves Tenacious D. That's right, me and KG.
That's me.
Well, now Tenacious D. Come fly with me, fly! like to juice.
Geek Therapy Radio, Saturday night at 10 on KPRC 950. Or listen anytime on our iHeartRadio app.